Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets bounce back in a big way, trailing in the fourth on the back of Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, Royce O'Neal, and Nic Claxton. They get it done, and quite frankly, do what we thought they would. Turn that old narrative around about surviving without Kevin Durant. We break down the big road win against the Golden State Warriors next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the winning Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie, owner-operator of DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel. He's got you covered. I'm Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the unfortunately losing New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast.
Keep
My
it out
boy
of it.
Andy Mack. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms. And let you know today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You know that first-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On, and Doug. That's what you want on a Sunday night, my friend, is Brooklyn just bouncing back in such a big way over these last two games, really capped off with a road win against the full-strength Golden State Warriors.
Buddy, this is where we needed to be. We went into the weekend worried a little bit about this team. Obviously, lost a couple games in a row. It was looking bleak, losing games against teams they should never have lost to, even without Durant. You're starting to think, what's this road trip going to be? The low-hanging fruit wasn't so low-hanging, and now tough games against the Jazz, tough games against a Warriors team that was going to be fully healthy by the time the Nets were able to come into town. No problem. Never worried. It is amazing. It's amazing once again how quickly the narrative around a team can just turn. It's what makes sports great and what makes sports infuriating at times. But this is exactly it. It's like just when you think you're looking at death's doorstep as a fate of a team, and it's like they can't stay together. They have no resolve. It looks like they can't. It looks like they can't really dial things up when they need to. 2 games washed away. The Jazz win was a nice one, obviously, and then you get to this Warriors one, which is, a full strength Warriors team that's had its struggles at times, but like a super difficult place to play. That crowd gets up as high as any crowd in the NBA. That team wants to step on this team for sure, and the Nets come in a comeback win of all things. Like, really, we'll talk about our friends over at FanDuel soon, but like if you're looking at this game at a certain point in like the fourth quarter, it was really hard to think about a Nets victory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just the way things were shaping up. And you wouldn't even have been mad about it. It's like, hey, this is the Warriors. This is a tough team to come back against. This is Steph. This is Clay. They've been down this road before. This is Draymond. Like they know how to do this. And the Nets on the back of Kyrie, on the back of Claxton, and a bunch of other role players that we'll get into, pull off one of their nicest wins of the year with or without KD.
Yeah.
Like this is just one of the nicest wins. We would have been psyched about this win if KD was on the court.
Yeah.
To have this win without KD makes it even sweeter. And it just shows you that like the team has a level they can get to with this just current iteration. And man, I'll tell you, just go back and listen to Thursdays and Fridays podcasts. give the NBA 72 hours. And it'll figure out like a new narrative for you.
Well, and it's so funny. 120-116, they win. You said we'll talk about some of the key guys that stepped up here, but there's a couple things. At a high level, without Kevin Durant, you looked at this game like I was thinking about in the fourth quarter as they're fading and they're down by double digits. I thought, you know what? Still a lot of quality to take away from this game. We know it's a good Warriors team. It's a championship level, right? So you're checking all these boxes. Like I'm already ready to kind of turn the narrative back around. And to your point, like it's like I feel like we catch ourselves constantly with this. We're a pretty darn even-keeled podcast when it comes to discussing the Brooklyn Nets. And just at the end of the week, we were like, with the schedule and the teams you played, come on, you got to give me a breadcrumb. And in a lot of ways, and Kyrie Irving talked about this in the pregame leading up to this one, or it was probably the postgame coming out of the Utah win, where he said, that's for you guys to talk about the narratives of last year and all these things. We don't feel that way in the locker room. And we've discussed it where you go, Great. You can tell me you don't feel that way, but everything that I'm seeing from a results standpoint is indicating maybe we're going to get there. These wins, these last 2 wins, and this win specifically against the Warriors, like it really does matter because a couple of really good quality W's against teams like this can make you then look back at the first 4 without Kevin Durant and say, okay, no Kyrie for one of those games, no Ben for one of those games, and just the adjustment of not playing with Kevin Durant, right? So like now 32, 46, 17, 5 seconds later, you get to kind of reset the timetable on this team, which is great because it was an absolutely fantastic win. And you mentioned the Kevin Durant piece. With or without Kevin Durant, this goes down as, hey, quality, one of the top wins that they've put on their resume this season.
Yeah, look, this is a group in the Warriors that just won the championship, right? Like this is the team, this is the group that did it, right?
Right.
Like this is
check the stats. Yep.
Well, yeah, this is so it's not like, and I get it. Like the Warriors have had their issues this year. They've had some injuries. They've had some rest situations. Although like they did a rest situation where they still pulled out a W the other night. So like this is just a team that will play you hard every single time. So like we said before, with or without KD, with KD, I think we'd be in here with just feeling just as excited, right? Yeah. To not have it be the case. And I think you make a great point about maybe, you know, the tales of the Nets demise were told too soon too, when we factor in that KD had played 1 million minutes going into that injury. They had to do very little without him over the course of the season because he'd played as much as any player in the league going into the injury. So there was maybe there wasn't as much continuity or much understanding sort of what they wanted to be as a team without him there, because frankly, they didn't need to have that as part of their narrative, right? Of leading up to that point. And yeah, maybe some of that does take a little time to be like, hey, do we want it to be super high usage Kyrie or more facilitator Kyrie? Well, it looks like over these last 2 games, the super high usage and efficiency sure looks like the way to go with him. You know, what are some of the rotations we're going to run? Where should the lion's share of the minutes go? Like, how is this going to look? These are hard problems to solve sometimes over in 1 game, in 2 games, 5 games. Like it does take time for these things to kind of mesh. Go back to the beginning of the season with this team where the first 5 to 10 games look as bad as humanly possible with a group that we were excited to see. Okay, there's a changing of the guard, and now all of a sudden, you know, the team gets some more time on task, and it looks really, really good. This is a situation where we're now without KD. It's like, yeah, it took a couple games. Turns out they got a bunch of high-level NBA talent on this team, and this team can still stand toe-to-toe. It wouldn't be a championship favorite squad, obviously, without KD, but is it a good, like we said at the beginning? And actually, it's funny, this version of them, this version that we saw tonight and we saw against Utah is the version why we actually weren't that negative when KD originally got injured, right? Like our original assessment of this situation at the onset of the KD injury was, hey, this is going to be okay. This isn't last year. This isn't Patty Mills, Kessler Edwards, and Day'Ron Sharpe starting for the Nets, which is what that starting lineup was. They walked it back for a few games where it looked pretty bad. But I think right now, after these 2 wins, we're right back to what our original assessment was this team is fine without him.
And it's why coming out of the first 4 losses without Kevin Durant, when someone asked me, where are you on the 1 to 10 scale of concern? I said 4. Now see me after Utah and we'll assess. Guess what? They won that game. So it drops it to a 2. Guess what? They beat Golden State. It drops it to a 1, maybe a 0, right? And these things matter. And it does shift really in a big way. We're going to talk about obviously the performance from Kyrie Irving and the way that he has been leading this team coming up here in a second. But reminder, 72 first half points surrendered by the Brooklyn Nets, just 18 in the third, just 26 in the fourth, 44 in the second half of this game. A lot of the work got done on the defensive end. That's what helped lead to this win. Let's talk about Kyrie Irving, though, next.
All right, before we get to that, we're going to tell you about our friends over at PrizePool. PrizePool is daily fantasy made easy. You're making entries on PrizePicks, and all you're doing over at PrizePicks is you're going against the player projections. That's it. You're going more or less on the PrizePicks projections, and you're just trying to win money. And they make it really, really easy. You pick 2 to 6 players. You figure out if they're going to go more or less in their PrizePicks projection. And when I say projection, I'm talking the stats like points, rebounds, assists. If we're talking NBA, blocks, steals, obviously they've got NFL. If you want to do yards, you want to do touchdowns, it's all covered over there on PrizePicks. They're trying to simplify it to make it easy. And you pick 2 to 6 players, you go more or less, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Very, very easy. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, so that you're in there and you're out. Safe and fast withdrawals. Not something you can say about every provider out there. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. PrizePicks Daily Fantasy made easy. You download the PrizePicks app, or you go to prizepicks.com. You sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code locked on. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you 100. You deposit 50, PrizePicks will give you 50. You can figure out all the other iterations there. Don't forget to enter the promo code locked on at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy.
All right, my friend, why don't we go ahead and dial up a little Kyrie Irving conversation here? Because one of the things when Kevin Durant went down was, what is this going to look like? And in the same way that 4 games can give you a bad sample, Kyrie only plays in 3 of them. But there was just kind of this weird momentum or lack thereof around the team and around Kyrie of saying, I don't know if you want him taking 40 shots. If he makes most of them, great. But you do want him to be taking on, I think, a little bit of a level of leadership. And I'll tell you, we'll talk about the scoring performance and all the great things that he does offensively, the clutch back-to-back triples that he had in this game to keep the momentum going for the Nets in the second half. But this is one of those areas that we talk about somewhat casually because it doesn't come up all the time. He was as locked in as you can be on the defensive end in this game. And that matters because that's where in the second half, that's what mattered most. And it's not always going to be pretty. It's not always going to be stops, but you need that maximum effort at the guard position, specifically with Kyrie. I know we want to talk scoring, but I think that matters just as much here.
Yeah, full complete game for him. 40 minutes, was locked in on both ends. They tried to pick on him a few times. He did a great job at Steph at times, really getting into Steph's pocket. Was able to chase him around stuff. Like,
God,
and I think
stat line. I'm sorry.
What's that?
I just noticed that he was 12 of 22, 38 points.
Okay,
Perfect.
well, this is what I was going to say next.
I just got blown away in the middle.
Yeah.
Please continue.
So this is what I was going to say next, right? So as much as like we can talk about the defensive piece, like I think what we've seen from Kyrie is this sort of the same sort of progression we were talking about just as a team and what their arc was since the KD injury. And some of this was like a feeling out of maybe what his role had to be. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the first game, when they come out of the gate, it's against the first one is against Boston. Obviously, the efficiency is not there. OKC, the efficiency is not there. The shots are down a little bit. Phoenix starts to get there, and actually it really starts to go. It's basically starting in that fourth quarter of the Phoenix game where it wasn't enough to get them all the way there, but you can start to see hey, if I can get fully in my bag and be efficient, like we are a super dangerous team. It comes a little too late in that game, right? And they aren't able to, they almost get all the way there on like a hero performance by him, and they don't. But then it continues on. And what we've seen these last 2 games is high volume and super high efficiency. The Jazz, he goes 18 for 29, 8 for 15 from 3, which is like an unbelievable amount of threes in a game. Gets to the line 6 times, finishes with 48 points. Tonight against Golden State, 12 of 22, shoots 71% from 3, 5 for 7, gets to the line a few more times, goes 9 for 9, and ends up with 38 points. At this volume, with the way he scores, it's not always going to be this efficient. That's just what you're going to live with Kyrie. Like he is a super efficient scorer. Like in general, like he can shoot in the mid range as good as anybody. He can get to the rim and he shoots threes great. At volume, at his size, it'll struggle for on a game to game to be like this. Like he's not going to shoot 60% from 3 from here on out, right? But the key to him is, unlike most other players, and I mean almost every other player in history at his stature, he can actually get to this point in games. And when he gets to this point, the Nets are going to be in it against anybody, right? Like if the other team cannot solve it and the other team is not able to apply enough pressure to him and they're not able to throw enough at him, and they didn't want to do it tonight, like they were too late in doing it, he is going to keep you in every game. Like, because if you can shoot this efficiently on offense, and it's almost impossible to do this, even against like bad defensive teams, much less a team like the Warriors. He has the ability, and he's one of the small group of guys that are like this, that can keep you in the game against anybody. And I think that's the progression we saw. It was like, not that great, not that great. Oh, here it comes against the Suns. It's there the whole game against the Jazz, win on the road in a tough environment. It's there the whole game against the Warriors in a super tough environment, and they get the win. I hate the one. We shouldn't make it as simple or as easy as it's all on Kyrie here, right? Like it's got to be everybody else, and it's not all on him.
Right.
But when he plays like this, he is of the class that when he plays like this, the team can beat anybody, and that we've seen over the last 2 games.
And I think you mentioned it too here, because we're going to talk about Nic Claxton in the final segment, because you have a great line over on Twitter in that regard, which I'll save for our closeout here. But I'll add in the 2 names that benefit greatly off of this, and why. When we talked about the absence of Kevin Durant and what Kyrie needs to do, it is about, even when you're taking over, even when it is hero ball, it has to be balanced. It has to be executed while still getting other guys involved. We know the clutch triple in this one by Royce O'Neal comes off of the Kyrie Irving feed. You have to make the active decision when you're having a game like you are, and you're shooting it ultra efficient, to still look across the court and say, the right play, the wide open play is Royce O'Neal, who, by the way, in this game, 4 of 7 from deep. You know that he's in that rhythm. When Royce has been off, he's been off. Guess what? Joe Harris, 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. He hits the triple that ties this game. All of these things are predicated on a Kyrie Irving performance that commands the attention of the defense and affords the spacing around the perimeter. And it's one of the things that we were certainly, and will still be going forward too, you're concerned about. Without Kevin Durant, the defensive assignments, the rotations, the switches, they can become a little bit easier for opposing teams. Unless Kyrie Irving gives you games like these, then it doesn't matter, because he's going into the teeth of the defense. He's forcing you to collapse. He's making the acrobatic plays, and he's laying off 9 assists in this game he came away with. Like that's as critical as anything as well. The scoring first and foremost, and then it's the assist, it's the facilitating, and then it's the defensive effort and energy. How long he can sustain this for in the absence of Kevin Durant, I think in a lot of ways, maybe that's why there's the night off, and you have to accept that, so you can maximize him in the games that you feel like you want to go out and make a statement. And that's what the Nets did tonight. So, I mean, I got nothing but glowing things to say about how Kyrie has played these last 2 games and how he's led the team as a leader, because somebody had to be that voice. And guess what? It's not going to be Ben Simmons. It needs to be Kyrie Irving. He can get himself off mute there, and he's going to pop back in. It's a great point. I don't want anyone to miss it, Doug.
It would be really, really easy for the team, and just like, an athlete in general, to be super down after the beginning run without it. And all athletes, or most that have been around the block more than a few times, which Kyrie has, although Kyrie hasn't always done this in his career, will be usually okay to say the right things in situations like this. We're not getting too down. We trust each other, blah, blah, blah. Right. Those are really easy things to say. And sometimes are hard to believe until you see it, right? Yeah. As a fan or anybody else, it's hard to believe that's the case until you see it. And I think that what we learned from this last couple games specifically is that, to go back to what I said before, I don't think Kyrie can get here every single night. He just doesn't have. He doesn't have historically shown that he can. By the way, I mean, nobody can get to this level.
Name the guy, name the guy that does.
Exactly, right. So it's like, that's not a knock. It's just like, it would be unrealistic to think we're going to be looking at averaging 40 points a game over the short term. It's just not going to happen. But if the belief is that these are paths to winning, and if the belief is that, getting close to 30 shots up a game with a super high usage and on ball time for Kyrie are paths to victory, you'll feel okay about this as a team without Durant. I think you can trust. Because I think that was some of the problems. Are we just going to see Kyrie hero ball? I think what we saw is that, is this hero ball? It is, because he's taking a vast majority of the shots compared to teammates, except that you realize, hey, there are certain guys that you are okay with that happening with, right? Yeah. There are guys out there that for a regular season game, in these games where you want to just stack wins where you can get them, because later in the season they're going to matter. Yeah, he can take 30 shots a game. He didn't take 30 shots in this one.
Took over 25% of the net shots tonight were Kyrie Irving. Only had
exactly. The usage is sick. Yeah. The usage is sick. The usage is sick, and you don't want to see it for most people. But in a situation like this, I think that it's good to know Because there will be games where it doesn't look as good. There will be these games that doesn't look as good. And I think that like we can still draw back and say, hey, it might not look as good and as efficient, but it's worth it to try because these can be the outcomes.
And I know we're going to get into Nic Claxton here in a second, but in the same way you would expect it of Kevin Durant or any superstar, specifically actually in these matchups against the Golden State Warriors, you want to look to your star to be the one that steps up, right? Like that's also a part of this. And maybe why you're able to get the wins against some tough opponents is because, yeah, this should be when Kyrie wants the ball in his hands the most and wants to be the reason you win. Or we would say the same thing if you had lost the game, right? You're always going to be the name that gets placed to it. Let's talk about how Nic Claxton helped Kyrie be the winner tonight.
All right, we're going to get into that in a second, but we're coming off this. The NFL playoffs are here, and we are so excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On. They're the number one sports book in America, FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports very fun, very easy. New customers join today to get started with $150 in free bets. Listen up here, folks. $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is the kind of deal we're talking about. You have to sign up at FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to the point spreads, the player props. I've been in these FanDuel streets forever. These guys are the absolute best. Plus, you can even combine your bets for an even bigger chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. Looking ahead to NFL this coming weekend, like we're just coming off the divisional round into the championship round. Eagles -2.5 after the absolute womp on the Giants. Sorry, Adam, but I think the 2.5 looking against, maybe not as much rest, a little of the extra day of rest. San Fran struggled a little harder game against Dallas. Like hit that -2.5 over at our friends over at FanDuel, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports book partner of the NFL.
So let's go ahead and start with a quote here as we talk about Nic Claxton. The number of Nets fans who wanted a big, lumbering, parentheses, still out of the league, close parentheses, center option instead of Nic Claxton will remain one of life's great mysteries. Douglas Norrie, that was Doug Norrie. I got to tell you, man, this game, a lot of these recent games,
sounds like a smart guy
all year long because we've been pumping our fist about him and riding this train. Nic Claxton is not only a starting center in the NBA, he's the Brooklyn Nets starting center, and he's a damn exceptional one at that. 15 rebounds in this game, a 24-point performance for him, 9 of 13. Listen, is the 6 of 15 from the line the most perfect thing in the world? No, but he went there and he knocked them down in a couple of key spots, especially in the fourth quarter. I don't know what else he could have to do. And I listen, it has to be the minority of Nets fans that still have some type of difficulty getting over that hump. However, it'll only take one game where some big from some team scores a few buckets around the basket to say, oh, you need somebody you can bring in. Nic Claxton is the defensive anchor of this team, and we know what Ben Simmons does. But you see how he is in and around the basket and how effective it is at helping create for Ben Simmons, even that transition offense that they want to get into. He's phenomenal, man. He's phenomenal. And the evolution of his game is just slowly starting to expand all the way throughout this season.
I don't even know where to start, frankly. It's like unbelievable. This is one, not just in the Nets. This is one of the best stories in the NBA this season. Like this is it. He's on the national stage now. He's been so good that it's not even just like a Nets story. I mean, forget the people that wanted these other guys in here. Like that was a joke at the time. It looks even worse now. Like I'm happy to bring up all the receipts from everyone out there who just, absolutely tailed us
in a package, get boosted.
Oh my God, forget it. Like just unbelievable. Don't worry. The receipts are there. It looks ridiculous. It looked ridiculous then. It looks even worse now, right? Like it looks so silly. This guy right now over our friends on FanDuel, he's currently plus 700, second overall in odds for defensive player in the year. Second overall. The guy wasn't on the board. He was not on the board to start the season. This is a test. You know how good you need to be to go from not on the board to second overall? Like you need to be so good. It just doesn't happen because it takes so long for the narrative to get there for you. Even if the stats are there, the narrative has to be there. Like enough basketball writers have to have heard of you. Like there's other things that have to happen here. Like there's other things that have to happen here that to just get you onto a stage where you're starting to talk about defensive player of the year category. He's behind Jaren Jackson Jr. Triple J is probably going to win because his stuff is actually like completely ridiculous. Regardless, it doesn't matter. Claxton has been so freaking good, and it's just only gotten better. You read that tweet. There was another one. I'll just put the stat out there now.
Yes, this is another great one. I was going to make sure you.
I'm going to round up now because it's a little different. 42%. It might be 43 now. 43% of Nic Claxton's career minutes have come this season. He's played in a few games. It's going to be half of all of his NBA minutes will become in this season. He's in his 4th year. He's actually really by minutes in his 2nd year. Yep. This is like a 2nd-year player we're talking about now. This is why we're seeing this leap. You do not see leaps like this. This is such a massive leap. He is ridiculous. Even with, and I'm going on and on here, but who cares? Even with the 6 for 15 from the free throw line tonight against the Warriors in his 36 minutes, they were a plus 23. Yep. Yeah, do we use plus minus when it helps us? Sure. In his 38 minutes the other night, he was a plus 29. Yep. When he's on the court for the Nets, they're a very, very, very good team. He's a defensive anchor, the offensive game. He leads the league in true shooting percentage. He leads the league in effective field goal percentage. He leads the league in field goal percentage. He's a star. That's it. Nic Claxton is a star. It's not just like a nice story now. Nic Claxton's a star. That's it.
Well, and here's the thing I'm going to say. We talked about how him being the 3rd best player on the team can be a problem. I don't think it's a problem. Now, does it mean that you think about matchups and whatever? You know what? We talked about this with the Nets before about when did the Nets get to the point when they were full strength of now we're the problem for other teams. You got to figure out how to adjust to us. Guess what? Nicholas Claxton is a problem for other teams. They have to figure out how to adjust to him. They worked the hack of Claxton in certain segments of this game. Okay, great. 6 of 15. It's not perfect, but guess what? I have, based on what he accomplished in his 2nd year right now, from 1 year to 2, and we talk about those minutes you brought up, I have nothing but full faith that over the back half of the season, every facet of his game is only going to continue to grow and get better. He's refined so many things this season, and obviously from the offseason coming in, the way that he turns and faces the basket and takes on defenders, collects fouls, and also goes to the line while finishing. He didn't do that a year ago. The way that he works the dribble handoffs at the top of the key and then sags towards the lane. Yes, he was doing it, but he wasn't doing it as fluidly last year. A lot of times those handoffs were a little bit more clunky. He is such a young player and is playing at such a high level. He was the highest plus minus, just 1 over top of Kyrie. But the fact that he is playing at this high of a level and you see it in his demeanor, that is what's turning the corner for me. And I said this in response to your percentage about how much he's played his career. I have full faith that, and I watched that special on him, coming from, his upbringing and all the way to Brooklyn. He's going to be the future point forward for this team. And I know that we can talk about that being outlandish. I don't think it is. I really think that all of his skill sets are going to evolve to the place. And we saw that sweet little mid-range jumper at the end of the Phoenix game. That's the next phase. It's going to get there. Now it's just about continuing to watch the growth. And it's a drone on and on. I just could not be more elated about it. And the one other thing I'll talk about receipts is when fans talked about dumping on the fact that he couldn't be the center. And now that he's playing like this, the other way they go with it is turning around and saying, and Sean Marks only gave him a 2-year contract. You can't win with the idea of, well, now that he's as good as he is, shame on you for not doing it. It's absolutely amazing. I love it.
Yeah, man, like I said, it's not hyperbole. It's one of the best stories in the NBA this season. It's easily one of the best contracts now. Like the $8 million a year seems like a total joke. Look, I'm not going to back run that one because we were like, hey, that's a nice deal. We'll see how it works out, right? And frankly, the conversation early on with him was like, even if you were positive with Claxton, I think sometimes you wonder, okay, how's it going to look with Ben? Like, how's it going to look with 2 non-shooters? Is that something that can work? We saw already that when it's KD, Kyrie, and then like just a 3rd shooter, you get away with the 2 non-shooters because the other guys are so good at defense and they can just do enough like around the rim, specifically with Claxton. But Claxton made it the case now where like you don't even like if it's him or Simmons having to play like any because you can't have the 2 shooters, you have to play Claxton. That's where he's pushed him. And that's not even a knock on Ben as much as it's just like it's a pro Claxton narrative, right? He's just
the reality of where Claxton's game is. Yeah.
He's just been that good, man. It's been such a cool story. He was amazing in this game. Katie tweeted a block of his the other night, which was sick against the Jazz, where he changed his block hand mid jump. Like he went up with his left hand against Sexton, went up with his left hand to block it. Sexton changed his direction in midair, and Claxton changed his arm in midair and just blocked it with his right hand. Like it's like what you see when you play against a kid or something, right? It's just ridiculous. So it's awesome. No one could be happier. And go ahead. We could probably close out of here.
Yes. Nicholas Claxton. I'm only going to give more Nicholas Claxton stats. Going back to December 28th, has not had fewer than 3 blocks in a game. That is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 games in a row with at least 3 blocks. And he has a ton of 4-block games. And he had 6 blocks against Atlanta and Charlotte back in December. Like that is game-changing ability, specifically on the defensive end. And something like that, the athleticism. He is now, that's the final thing I'll say is, and we talked about this going back to last year when he had to play Embiid and he didn't even have the size yet. And it was, well, he figured out a way to give ground and try to use his athleticism and his length to still force some alterations. That's what he's tapped into defensively, especially around the rim. It's, I'm athletic enough. You make your move first. I'm quick enough, athletic enough, and smart enough to actually still be able to recover and make the play on it. That's something that he's come from last year to this year, where last year I think he wanted to be overly aggressive. He now realizes that he can go toe-to-toe with any assignment and wait for the play to come to him. And that's why I think you've seen such a massive increase in his blocks over the course of this year. By the way, the Nets did beat the Warriors tonight, even though we're on our Nic Claxton campaign right now.
Oh yeah, if you're joining us on YouTube right now, we've been going on for 30 minutes about how great this win was. Yeah, Claxton leads the league in blocks by 6, is the next closest. JJJ might catch him. Like his blocks per game are ridiculous, but regardless, like this has been a very, very cool story. Okay, we are going to be back again tomorrow. We got a cool guest coming up later this week also, so we're excited about that one. We'll hang around for a minute or two in YouTube. So if you're over listen on the podcast platform, or right now, if you're in YouTube, and there's a lot of people in YouTube right now, if you're in YouTube, go down while we close out this episode and hit subscribe on YouTube. We really appreciate everyone that jumped in. This actually, when we get down to the tail end of this, is probably going to be one of our biggest live feeds. So if you are in YouTube right now, go and hit subscribe to Locked On Nets YouTube. Totally free. It really, really helps us. If you listen on the podcast, what are you doing? Get over on YouTube and hit subscribe over on YouTube, because you're going to get extra stuff, because we're going to cut the podcast feed off now, but we're going to go live on YouTube for a little bit longer, answer some fan questions. If you got some fan questions, throw them at Locked On Nets, and there we'll try to get to a couple. Subscribe to Locked On Nets over at YouTube.
You know, it was great because before this game came in, before the Utah game as well, it was heard that they had a quote in the locker room, and it read, "What's so fascinating and frustrating and great about life is that you're constantly starting over all the time." And I love that. Bill Kristall.
Oh, one of the you know, we workshopped that the other night, and you still got a laugh out of me because I forgot we talked about it.
That's right.
All right. One of the all-time great poets. We will be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
The Post podcast, man. I got to tell you, dude, when we are the West Coast games, and we'll welcome everybody in. Doug said it at Locked On Nets. If you got a question or a comment or just a fascinating, glorious statement about how great this win was, the West Coast games are hard for us. They are late, and we have no problem staying up for them. And it's incredibly gratifying to come into something like the YouTube Live and see almost 500 people when we're peaking, over 400 right now. And it's great because that's the community we want to build here. So I want to make sure that we just, again, like Doug said, thank everybody for being in and being a part of this. Let's take a look at Maine Taylor here. What do you all think about JV not bringing Ben back in for defense in the closing seconds? I thought Ben should have been out on the floor. Having Seth and Joe on the floor was risky. Yeah, in theory. By the way, you had Nicholas Claxton out there, so that's the other defensive guy you put out there. I just think that you have to balance it a little bit about still having firepower, because you may need the shot, you may need the bucket, and you're going to need that spacing.
I still think there's like a little bit of distrust here with Simmons, like in crucial situations. I don't think he's shown that it's like all great on that end. We have Eric Slater coming on later this week, he's talked a lot about Simmons and the game this season. I'm really interested to get his take on some of this stuff. But I'm not crazy weirded out by that, because I think that you were in a possible basket for basket trading situation down the stretch, and especially just on the off chance that you were winning and they were going to foul somebody who had the ball. Like, you have to have those other guys on the court. Like, it's bad enough to have Claxton here with just strictly with the foul shooting.
And he
right?
JV went with Watanabe for Claxton, offense for defense on a couple of possessions late too. So, they got everybody off the court.
It's tough. It's tough. And this is going to be a play. We talked about this as like a massive playoff weakness later. Like we've admitted this, like this is a problem. Like, no, it's very rare to get the fully perfect group of people. Most players have weaknesses. Like, this is a weakness for the Nets for sure. And that has not been fully figured out yet. But I think I'm not like super surprised he wasn't closing.
There was I didn't even notice this. I saw that
I thought this was funny too.
That just Sean Marks is in the stands, but also, and I apologize for forgetting her first name. Josiah's wife was also there checking out the game too. So
Clara.
A lot of fun, a lot of Nets heads there. Does it mean a trade's coming up? I don't know if it's indicative of anything. Maybe it's just maybe it's a
San Francisco. Thing. It's a good place to visit. I don't know.
I was gonna say nice West Coast.
Not the worst place. I was like, I had the same thought. I was like, it's interesting that he's there. He was showing that. They showed him at like his most stressed out moment. I think it was on the Draymond kick. I can't remember what it was. It was like some moment.
Oh yeah, they got pulled back there on the Claxton.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. I don't remember. They showed him at a point where he looked pissed off, which I thought was funny.
Sean Marks, he's living the dream if he can just keep his superstar Kevin Durant healthy. Oh, Clash, one of our frequent flyers. Do you think that Joe has finally turned the corner? I'm disappointed how Yuta has played since KD went down. TJ's fallen off a cliff as well. What gives? So we talked about Yuta. We said one of the guys that was going to suffer without Kevin Durant is going to be Yuta. Why? Because he's a guy that was averaging 11 minutes a game in his career, gets an expanded role, and it's predicated off of it. And he said as much. All I got to do is kind of occupy space and, get some easy looks. So that doesn't surprise me. TJ Warren, we talked about the minutes restrictions that he's on. I think that this is what you're going to see. He's still trying to get himself fully up to speed. The Joe Harris piece, it's been an up and down season, but all I can go back and say, it's like he has a lot of good games. Listen, turning a corner is hard for me. We said this last time. If you don't like Joe, it's going to be about the playoffs and can he come through? I saw tonight, the Nets were down 3. Joe Harris knocked down the triple that tied the game. I don't know what else you can ask of him. I would prefer consistency from him. When Royce has up and down nights, it's not the same standard that Joe Harris has kind of established for himself. So hopefully, and again, guy coming off of injuries, I think there's a clunkiness to what the Nets need to figure out here. Hopefully Joe's good, but we've always been in his corner.
Yeah, he's back up to just about 40% from 3 for the season. I tend to try to look at Look, personally, this is how I view the guys like this. Specialists like Harris, mini specialists like Curry. We had the same thought about Patty Mills last season, is that I will always look at these guys in the aggregate. I'm never, ever going to just go game by game on this stuff because this is the exact stat that you really can't go game by game. Like, you just have to look at what is happening in the aggregate. It's a 40%. If you're shooting 40+%, here's a news flash. That means you're missing more than half your 3-pointers. This is just how the math works. You just have to look at it in the aggregate. If you get obsessed on a game-to-game basis with Joe Harris's threes and make determinations about whether he has it or doesn't based on if he makes 4 for 6 in one game and goes 1 for 8 for another game, you're going to just drive yourself nuts. There's no other way around it. So and the other thing, he's still shooting under his career averages for the season. It's looked better. It's looked up and down. That's just what's always going to be the case.
He shot almost 55% in December. I think that's it. Like that's always it's always hard.
Headed in the right direction. But we said this with the Patty Mills last year. It was like he shot hot. By the way, it frankly is the same thing with Yuta too. Like, it's regression. Regression works both ways. Like, most players regress to their historical means, especially with 3-point shooting. It stood to reason last year that Patty Mills' 3-point shooting was going to drop off at some point. He just wasn't going to be like a 50% 3-point shooter for the whole career. Yuta Watanabe was not going to be like a 65% free 3-point shooter. You know how I know? Because no one's ever been that. So that's just the way it is. Harris is the other way. Was he going to be a 30% 3-point shooter?
Right.
The whole season? History would say no. Right. And this is just how it is. So I think you just got to look at these things in as big a sample size as you can.
I'm only throwing this up because I don't know if it was something you noticed. You were saying, did you catch Claxton with a chill bro when Ben was subbed out? I don't
when they were at the free throw, it was like at the free throw line. Like, it was when they were, I noticed it looked like they said something and I think they were surprised by I think they maybe were surprised by the sub, but I didn't think it was a huge deal.
Yeah. All right. Other than that, man, honestly, unless you have other glowing thoughts, I mean, again, it's still over 400 people in here. Anyone else has questions at Locked On Nets, throw it out there. Is it just me or does Joe Harris trail the defender going to the basket? Yeah, he does. I see it from JS. I'll throw it up here. Yeah, he was covering. He was on Curry at one point, and first of all, it's already a ridiculous assignment for him. Everybody gets that. That's intentional because if he stays in front of him, he's going to end up drawing a defensive foul because he can't stay in front of Steph Curry. But he stays on his one side, so he's driving towards the help defense in and around the basket. The goal there is to force him towards a Nic Claxton, towards a Ben Simmons, towards someone else there that's there to help. That's by design. Now, does it always look pretty? No, but that's the goal there for him.
And these guards are always going to be problems for the the defensive assignments here. We saw it early. That's why they got $1 million. It looked like a layup line at times. Like these are going to be really, really hard assignments to stick with these guys in the motion offense, especially with Poole starting. Like guys like Harris and Royce O'Neal are like a little out of their depth, which makes Claxton even more important. And Simmons was good on defense tonight too. They were. Good.
I felt like we did this thing tonight because we were talking so much about Claxton. It's like I didn't think Ben had an effective game in a lot of nice areas, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
We're at the point now where it's like we're waiting for that next big thing to happen with Ben Simmons. And in the meantime, it actually is like, yeah, man, give me 6 to 8 assists a game and give me your rebounds and do those things. That's the floor for you. And the same thing, by the way, it's like I could talk about Royce all day, but hey, yeah, knock down some threes, play some good defense. That's the role that you need to serve here.
I think this is a good question because actually Blaze puts this in a way that is actually the best way to think about this, about Simmons. I guess everyone on YouTube is just seeing this. Do you think we can win a championship with Ben Simmons on the roster with his current salary? This is the best way to frame this around Simmons because there's, theoretical caps on how much you can spend. It's really hard to get value at the lower end of the tier of guys that can help you win championships because most guys that are championship level players get paid, right? So like this is why actually frankly having Claxton in the books at 8 million is like one of the biggest W's of all time, right? Yeah. Because they're able to save money. My actual belief of this is it's going to be hard. Like it's always going to be really hard with Simmons making this much money for what he's doing on the court, even if I'm like generally pleased with what's happening with Simmons, like it's so hard to overcome the salary constraint on a guy who does not perform like a $35 million a year player, even if you like Simmons, like he's not playing like a 30, whatever he makes, 36 million player a year. I think it would be really hard. Like the best example or a good example of this where it did work was Wiggins last year for the Warriors, who was making a lot of money, was not playing like what he was making, but the rest of the team was so good and they spent so far into the luxury tax to like kind of make up for it. But other than that, it is really hard when your top end players on the salary tier do not play to their contract. It is actually the most difficult thing to make up. Like you just can't. This is why when you overpay the wrong guy, like you're like kind of stuck, right? So I don't know. Maybe I went too long on this, but I appreciate asking the question like this because this is actually the operative question. It's actually less about Simmons's play, and it's more about Simmons's play combined with what else you might not be able to do under the cap because of how much money he makes.
Yeah, and it's not something that, like in the NFL, they go to players, we're going to restructure you, we're going to lower your cap hit and whatever. Like that doesn't occur in the NBA. So no, it's a big problem. They don't have exemptions at the deadline. They have a practical. I looked this up in the background. Coming into the 2022-2023 season, the Brooklyn Nets had, they said, it's like a functional cap space, negative 74 million. So they got some areas that they can work with here. But this is the thing about at the time of the Harden trade. Again, you're trying to get back the best value, whatever that you associate that to be, but it is occupying a lot of ways. You're like, you might as well occupy the dollars because it wasn't going to be a one-to-one coming and going anyway. So you take the shot on this, knowing that we were already earmarking a significant amount of money inside of 3 players at the top of our roster, and you hope that it works out. But I think it's a smart question the way that he framed it as well.
And I want to say one more thing. Like I'm starting to understand like what happens here is like if you don't praise Ben, it seems like you're tearing him down. I'm not actually. Like it's not that. It's just like some of this is kind of a math problem. I think Simmons has been fine, right? Like I think there's things you want him to see him do better. He's been fine. It's like it's not a knock on him. So just because damning with faint praise doesn't always mean you're, like ripping someone down.
This was
right. Is easy for me
because Like it's and mostly, but I mean, like when you're playing anyway, like it becomes this in between. When you're playing him and Ben together, it becomes such a.
I mean, yeah, he kind of like does. It's not
That's
that.
what I was
It's
gonna
just
say.
like,
It's like depending on offense or defense, he is kind of playing not the 5 at times, and then he is playing the traditional 5 depending on assignments and matchups. So it's more matchup based to me. I'll say this to touch back to that last question. In the non Ben Simmons version of this team, where there's something else playing at the 5, there is a world where I'd say, like, oh, shifting these things down and creating these other matchups, maybe. But you actually do need the stretch 5 in the Ben Simmons role so that you have a guy in the perimeter that's spacing things out, et cetera. It just doesn't exist in this version of the team.
Correct. All right. Yeah.
This is why I believe in their score, Claxton. Oh yeah, see, I'm not down with this either. And this is just an overall thing. I'm not knocking you, JS. Then we'll take one more. We'll get out of here. But I said this when they were without Kevin Durant, and everyone was saying they have to go get a legitimate third scorer. I don't believe that that's the case. We said this consistently, and Doug and I think, but I won't speak for Doug, but they need a facilitating defensive-minded guard in the backcourt to help set the table and to take on some of those defensive assignments, like the ones you don't want Joe Harris to get stuck with in certain stretches against difficult matchups. That's the most important thing to me. Like tonight's actually proof that you don't need another full-time scorer. With only Kyrie Irving as your elite superstar, no Kevin Durant, and a solid supporting cast, you just beat the Golden State Warriors. So I'm not a big fan of that. But anything else? Anybody? All right.
No, let's do it. We got some other locked on stuff to do here. So yeah, we'll probably just get it. I really, really, really appreciate everyone that jumped in here. The numbers are amazing after OW. I know people want to get their nets on, and like we're the same way. So really just appreciate everyone that jumped into YouTube. We are going to be back with a full schedule this week. Make sure you visit PrizePicks. Make sure you visit FanDuel. Locked on for the promo codes for both those, and make sure you subscribe to YouTube right now before we get out of here. Go do it.
Appreciate everybody. We'll be back in next time talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball.